Hi, good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday. We are coming off of a long holiday in Japan. And I am JJWalsh here in Hiroshima, and I am with.
Hi, I'm Tove and I'm coming to you from Yokohama, just outside Tokyo.
And today, once again, is our weekly 30-minute chat as we are both working with sustainability in Japan and talking about our things that are on our radar. Today, we have some great news as well as book recommendations. And yeah, let's get started. Tova, you want to start?
Okay, so I think a topic that's been on everybody's minds for quite some time, and particularly since the pandemic began, is life-work balance, right? We're all looking at, really how can we be living and working better, more sustainably, for being able to keep going and enjoy our lifestyles more, as well as just surviving and paying the bills. And there was an interesting article that came out in the Nikkei Asia a couple of days ago, saying that Panasonic in Japan, one of the giants, obviously, of Japanese industry, has said it's going to move to a 4-day work week for anybody who wants it. So previously, I think a lot of companies had perhaps had that option if you were caring for elderly parents or had other specific circumstances. But this is going to be open to everyone. And they've decided that, this is something that moving forward, particularly the younger generations are looking for more of a balance, more time to pursue life outside work. And so they've committed to this 4-day work week. And we know other companies have tried it, right? Microsoft tried it, I think, a couple of years ago and said that, 90% of people really enjoyed that and received it very positively. So, there are other companies experimenting with it as well. So, yeah, an
Wow,
interesting trend.
interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard about that. There was a book a few years ago, The 4-Day Work Week,
That's right.
written about entrepreneurs and how you can create your own work-life balance with your 4-day work week. And it's great to see big companies taking this concept on and try to give people a better work-life balance. I know years ago I talked to some people from Mazda because we
Mm-hmm.
have Mazda here in Hiroshima, big industry. And he was talking about Mazda shifting to turning the lights off at 6 p.m. on weekdays to make sure that everybody was home. So it's not only about like saving energy, but it was
Right.
the only way that they found to get people home and out the door.
Yep.
There's so
Yep.
much for people who haven't worked in Japan, you know about this pressure, right? You don't leave, even if technically your working hours are over, you don't leave because of peer pressure or your boss hasn't left yet, right?
Yep.
So if you have a 4-day work week, hopefully that'll work better
Yep.
for Panasonic. Be interesting to see.
I'm really curious to see what the uptake is on this, and what the sort of longer term impact is on their recruiting. There's a huge battle now to get the best talent here with a shrinking workforce. So that should theoretically make them more attractive to potential employees, but also to see how that impacts the company in terms of productivity long term. Because kind of on the flip side of this and related to this topic as well, there was another article, I think I saw it yesterday, I'm not sure when it came out, an opinion piece in the Financial Times, the FT, from somebody saying, let's admit it and be honest, work from home is not really working for a lot of people and for a lot of companies. And looking at, one of the factors being that it's very, very hard to switch off. When you go to the office, you do your job, you finish, like you say, you turn, the lights are off, your computer's off, you come home, and you can then make that transition to your, family life or your personal life. It's not so easy when you're working from home. And I think that's something a lot of people have struggled with through the pandemic. And I think at the beginning, the research was showing, according to this article, that, productivity was actually really good early on in the pandemic, but then working hours have got longer and productivity has actually dropped. And then the working hours, people are actually putting less time in and perhaps getting a little disillusioned with the whole thing. A lot of companies also have been finding it very, very hard to maintain their corporate culture really, when people are not there in person, to maintain the connections, to build trust within teams, particularly people who have joined the since the pandemic began, have been fully remote. That's really, really quite a challenge for a lot of companies. A lot of clients we work with have are experiencing this and talking about it.
Wow.
So it doesn't work for everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we talked about this as well last week, right? About having those breaks and not, even though you're working from home, not just working back to back meetings, but having breaks in between to get out, do a walk, do some laundry, do some stretching, like just have a mental break from those meetings online all the time. It's such a different dynamic, isn't it? Like, even though it feels like you should have better work-life balance working from home, you feel more pressure because you can't escape. You can't come home to escape work anymore, right?
Exactly. You're just always on. And I think that's impacting mental health, well-being, perhaps physical health as well, if people are just sat in front of computers the whole time. I mean, I know I noticed at one point last year that when I was sat in front of the computer all day working, and then I go directly from that to the next room to start making dinner or, something like this, the number of steps per day, when I looked at, sort of how many steps I was logging up on my little gadget, it was, it dropped dramatically. You're not walking to the station anymore, or walking out to go and get lunch and back into the office, or between, clients and different meetings as well. They're just the actual movement goes down a lot. And I think long term, that really begins to impact. But it's a shame. I don't want to lose.
Especially for people like you, Tove, who are working in Tokyo or big cities. I think this has been a big shift, right? Because usually, like, my sister is a longtime Tokyo entrepreneur as well, and she gets so many steps in, like you said, just going to public transport, walking from building to building, and now you don't have that exercise. You don't have that outdoor interaction. You don't have that face-to-face, being close to other people as well. It's a really different dynamic now, isn't it?
Yeah, very different. So there are kind of, the article was looking at a lot of the negative impacts and side effects, and how these are kind of manifesting in productivity, losses and stuff. But I also think that we've got to be careful that we don't lose some of the benefits that we've had. So I think for people who are working parents or are caring for people at home, or people who have mobility issues, actually being able to work from home has given them opportunities they would never have had before. And in terms of sustainability and decent work and economic growth, and inclusiveness, we want to keep those benefits. But it's finding that balance, isn't it, between making it inclusive and work available to people, but also thinking about, actually, this doesn't work for everyone. So how can we have that hybrid culture, but really use it effectively to get the maximum benefits without, the risks that it also comes with.
Yeah, absolutely. And my news of the week, and I know I'm quite late to the game here, but I have just, thank you to my Japanese teacher, Ako Sensei. She does great Japanese lessons, and she's always focused on technology and the game industry. And this week, our topic is Toyota's Woven City. Have you heard about this, Tove?
Yes, yeah, it's out near Fujisan, right?
Right? And so
Yamanashi,
they're kind of, last year was a really big year for development for the whole Toyota Woven City. It was actually starting to be built. And so in preparation for this class, I've had the chance to go through their website, go through a lot of the videos about the vision, but also about more recent news about how it's going, the development in progress. Now, it's a really interesting idea, right? Because they're trying to build something that, as the Toyota CEO says, hits all 17 the SDGs.
Wow. That's
In
a huge
fact, he says,
ambition.
I want to add one more. He says, I want to add the SDG for happiness. He says in one of his speeches, right? And so, there's there's so many experts from around the world that are collaborating on this project. They've got designers and engineers, and of course, all the technology has to be integrated with how people want to live. A big theme of the whole design concept is mobility, but they say mobility has two meanings for them: mobility in getting moving and mobility in emotion.
Oh, wow.
It's really interesting, right? So
Mm.
there's so many firsts that we're gonna start to see develop here
Yeah,
with
yeah.
this whole concept. And I loved watching the video yesterday about creating walkways that go across just for pedestrians, which
Yeah,
go through trees and gardens and take it slower on your way around the city.
yeah.
And eventually, I think at first they're thinking of like 300 people are going to live there, probably mostly people who are actively creating it, right? Making it work,
Yeah.
testing it out. Eventually, they want to expand to 2,000 people. Now, this has so many questions in my mind. Now, Tova, you are a specialty person, expert. I'm losing my English. About the social side of sustainability. And this whole woven city concept is all high tech. It's all using renewable energy, hydrogen power, geothermal as well. So all the
Fantastic.
technical sides of environmental sustainability seem covered, but I'm really interested, as I'm sure you are, in how it's going to work from a social side. Like, how are
Absolutely.
we really going to choose the right people to live there who are gonna appreciate it, be willing to take the risk, but also be willing to work and live in a different way?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
from a social perspective, it's gonna be really interesting, right?
This is, for me, the most interesting part of it. I mean, the technologies, like you say, the process side, the energy and all of that, and the infrastructure, these things have been out there for quite a long time. You know, we know these things theoretically can work really well from an environmental perspective, and, you know, from a social perspective in terms of the process is making things more accessible for people, easier for people. You know, we know that is possible, but like you say, that the real test here is going to be, how do people respond to that emotionally? How prepared are they to change their lifestyles and live and work in a very, very different way? You know, humans generally are not overly keen on change. It's something that takes usually a very long time to happen. And if people are pushed into it, they tend to push back. So it's about, you know, finding, I suppose, a way forward that people can be happy to move into, and then perhaps nudging them towards particular sort of changes through sort of making some choices easier than others. So I'm really, really curious to see how this plays out from a social perspective, like you say. Oh, wow.
I came across this video today, and it's showing time lapse from last year about the work in progress. And you can see how they've chosen such a beautiful location.
Oh,
They are
absolutely.
right in view of Japan's most famous iconic view, Mount Fuji, of course. And they've started construction. Of course, if they're going to tap into geothermal, this is also a very good place to be. We know that under Mount Fuji, there's actually active volcano, right? That it
Yep.
hopefully
Yeah.
won't erupt anytime soon.
Let's
But
hope not.
tapping into that geothermal power is really smart.
Mhm.
All of the public transportation is going to be autonomous as well as zero emissions, right? So it's just like many of the engineers have said from around the world who are part of the project. This is a great testing ground, right?
Yeah.
This is a great controlled space to see if these concepts, these futuristic concepts, can really work in the
Mhm.
real day to day. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
very exciting.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like you said, that the people who are there at the moment, the people, you know, the first ones going to be living there are the ones involved in creating it as well. So obviously they're keen to be there to see this work. They've got a real sort of stake in this. So it's great that, they'll get to live there while they're creating it, to see what works and doesn't, actually, from a personal, from a community or family point of view, and then to be able to make changes before it's opened up more broadly.
Yeah. And if they're looking for volunteers who are very invested in sustainability, I know someone who might want to apply and be part of your test project.
Just
But
putting it out there.
really, how exciting! How exciting for anyone involved in this new futuristic type of more sustainable city. So I was so happy that I stumbled upon this, and I'm sure I must have heard about it years ago. But there is a problem with the katakana, in that it's in English, it's called woven city, which is a beautiful idea of weaving technology and social needs and sustainability, all the different weaving things together is a wonderful concept. But in Japanese, the katakana sounds just like urban.
Okay.
Uban city, right? So I think for many years I was hearing it as an urban city, and I was like, urban city, that sounds like maybe a mansion project or something, like confusing, right? So woven and uban in Japanese is kind of a different sound.
Right. Yes. Yeah. One of those cases where the name doesn't always translate very easily.
Yeah. But now that I've got it, now I know what to listen for. In the discussions about it, then I'll hopefully be able to pick it up a bit better now.
Brilliant. No, I look forward to seeing how it develops and what we can learn from this.
Yeah, definitely. I've got a few announcements just about talks this week. Tove and I, just to save the date, everyone who's watching, we are going to do a joint conference, all-day amazing event. Please save the date for March 21st, which is a national holiday this year. And we're thinking from sometime early morning, 9 o'clock until 4 o'clock, have a bunch of different activities and presentations through the day. So please save the date for that. So excited, Tove. We've got a lot going on in our minds, right?
Absolutely. And we'll be talking to some people later this week to start to move things forward on the logistics side. So hopefully we'll be able to announce some more details on that soon.
Yeah, wonderful. And tickets are going to be on sale from next month. So we've got to get everything down this month and really start getting the information out there.
Yep, clock is ticking.
Yeah. This week in the talk show, I've got a couple of interesting guests. On Thursday, I'm talking with Tony Vega. Tony has been doing JapanStation podcast for many years, and he has just started JapanKyo. Wait, I have to check now. JapanKyo documentaries, and he's working with a filmmaker in Japan. He's based in Hawaii, but he speaks Japanese really well. The filmmaker he's working with in Japan doesn't speak Japanese as well, but he's a great filmmaker. So they're collaborating on doing these like short documentary interviews with interesting subculture people in Japan. It's not your typical situation, and doing those documentaries now on YouTube. So that's really exciting to be able to talk to him. This Friday, I was supposed to have an event in Hiroshima, but we're having a big uptick in cases for coronavirus. So we've canceled the in-person part of the event. And I'll be talking to one of the guest speakers who was planned to come to the event anyway. And we'll be doing it as a regular Seek Sustainable Japan episode on Friday, 6 p.m. And she has insights from kagura in the rural area of Hiroshima. Have you ever heard of kagura?
I haven't, no.
So it's a really fascinating, Shimane and Hiroshima is most famous for it. It's a performance with costumes based on folklore, Japanese folklore. It's got great music that accompanies it, lots of drumming, so it's very exciting. And her area that she's moved out into is really famous for kagura. So she'll be talking about that and how she's doing SDG seminars and trying to kind of influence the way forward for businesses and travel for her rural area. So that should be a good talk.
Brilliant. Good. That's great. I'll look forward to listening.
Yeah. Now, I just finished uploading part 1 of an edited version of a talk I did with Lisa Mimura. And she had a really interesting talk on the show a couple weeks ago, talking about creating tours which are more regenerative. Tova,
Wow.
have you heard more about like regenerative travel or
Well,
sustainable
yeah.
travel kind of to the next level, right?
Yes, but I haven't heard about it in Japan, so I'm curious to know, what's happening, what she's doing there.
Yeah, so I just uploaded the edited form, so it's a bit uh, more of a nice video to watch. I hope not so many pauses or technical difficulties. Now, what she's doing is she got an award for Good Travel Award from Hiroshima for a project that she was doing to regenerate the forest, taking some of the seeds from the trees and creating these small, like bonsai type plants to
Oh,
let it
wonderful.
grow first in your house and then plant it back into the forest. That was
Mm-hmm.
part of her project. And then she worked with some local people, local community groups to clear the hiking paths, which they would then use for their Asageshiki walking tour. And so we talk in the show about creating the tour and all the different elements she's using. She created a zero waste bento box that
Oh,
the guides
fantastic.
carry on their back, and then
Brilliant.
the
Mm-hmm.
bentos don't have any waste as well. You can reuse everything. She's just so innovative, and it's
Yeah.
so exciting to talk to a young social entrepreneur in
Mm-hmm.
Hiroshima who's just trying to make all these things work. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And it's wonderful, the creativity. You say thinking of all the little details and getting people involved in different aspects of, sort of creating future possibilities as well, clearing the hiking trails and stuff so that they can be used by people moving forward. I think if you can get people involved in things like that, I mean, we were talking earlier about organizational change and stuff and how that's often, well, living lifestyle change and how it's difficult to get people to change. But I think one of the best ways we found, and we do this with the work with our clients, is get people involved. If you're just telling them, now you need to do this, now you need to do that, people will generally not feel very engaged with it. It's difficult to get buy-in. But if you can show people, yeah, you can be part of this, you can have a stake in this as well, and then they feel that sense of connection and pride and accountability for the outcomes as well. So that can be such a powerful motivator to show what's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And she also, one of the things that she's doing, regenerative in terms of rebuilding community as well as rebuilding the natural environment.
Mm-hmm.
So she gives 5% of any profits back to the community, people who are trying to
Beautiful.
clear the
Yeah.
paths and do stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
she really had such a great, clear concept about all the people, planet, profit, imbalance kind of concepts, but she never formally studied sustainability in that way. But she comes from an artisan family background. She
Okay.
grew up in a really interesting area of Hiroshima called Kumano, where they're
Mm-hmm.
famous for making brushes,
Okay.
calligraphy brushes, makeup brushes. And so she kind of credits growing up with this like heritage of the long family history of traditions in Japan
Mm-hmm.
as being something that she's now using in how she wants to do business as an entrepreneur. Isn't that
Yeah.
beautiful? I love
It
that.
is. It's beautiful, and yeah, I love the idea that her background helps her have this long-term view and thinking about community as well, from coming from a family business and stuff like that. It's all of these little connections really matter and make a difference.
Yeah. And listening to the Toyota CEO about Woven City, he's also saying the same thing, right? He
Mm,
says, when my grandfather started the company 80 years ago, probably his father, that legacy was about creating happiness and having a balance for people, planet, and profit. He didn't say those
Mhm.
three words, but that's what he's talking about, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So any long-term successful business in Japan often has these elements embedded in
Yes.
how they do business and their
Mhm.
philosophy, right?
Absolutely. And that's a massive strength, I think, for companies here, and something that they can really leverage moving forward into sort of moving into more sustainable practices. To fall back on those core values and the understanding they have of the benefits of long-term thinking is really powerful.
Yeah. So it's 5 minutes to go. We are going to talk about some book recommendations. You want to start? You've got a great book recommendation,
So,
Beyond Breaking
yeah.
Boundaries.
So this book is actually also, you can see it says at the top there, a Netflix documentary as well. So I first came across it on Netflix. So the book is, as you can see, by Johan Rockstrom and Owen Gaffney. So Johan Rockstrom is kind of one of the gurus of sustainability, really globally. He's incredible scientist, but is able to explain concepts, very complicated concepts, in a way that is very easy for the average person to understand. And they're talking about planetary boundaries here. And by planetary boundaries, we mean sort of the level, the line, if you like, for things like for carbon, for biodiversity, for all of these things over which we should not go, because it becomes sort of impossible to go back from that. So the boundaries are the sort of the safe parameters, if you like, for us to operate in as humanity on the earth. And he really explains those very, very clearly. I haven't had a chance to dig into the book yet, but just looking through the main sort of sections of it, it really gives you a bit of background, but it's not a heavy read by the looks of it. But then it breaks down very clearly, what are these boundaries? How do they impact us? And what does that mean for us as individuals, as communities, as nations, etc.? What kind of changes do we need to be making? And it's very, very clear messaging. And the documentary on Netflix was narrated by one of my long-term or sort of lifelong idols, Sir David Attenborough. So for me, I watch anything that Sir David Attenborough is doing. So that's what attracted me in the first place. But the combination of him with Johan Rockstrom in the documentary, talking about these boundaries and just showing really, really clearly how close we are to a lot of those boundaries and what we need to do to move back into a safer operating zone, was
Yeah,
an
sounds
incredible
great.
watch. So
And I saw that the foreword is written by Greta Thunberg, right?
that's
So
right. Yes. So sort of spanning generations, right? You've got Greta, who's I think not yet 20, she's maybe 19 or so, through to Sir David Attenborough, who's in his 90s. So it's bringing together all generations. This is not just the old guard saying, well, here's what we need to do now, youngsters, listen up. It's really bringing it all together. So very,
yeah.
very powerful, and highly recommend it.
That's great. Yeah, sounds awesome. My book recommendation this week is Winifred Bird's Eating Wild Japan. Now, I have been really enjoying the shiitake this season, right? We are having such amazing shiitake come out in all the stores and local shops. And a friend just went to a rural area and brought us back these giant shiitake, which I grilled up and made into these beautiful sandwiches yesterday.
Wow.
So shiitake is one of the forest foods that she talks about in this book, about visiting people around Japan who are kind of professional or full-time forest foragers
Wow.
who know what herbs and plants and foods to find in the forest. She gives some heritage and history insights about how these practices have changed over the years. She provides some recipes inside the book. One of my favorite stories, because I had the chance to interview her last year as well. One of my favorite stories she told is about going to a bamboo restaurant in Kyoto and
Ooh,
having 10 courses of bamboo.
that sounds amazing. I love bamboo.
And you're
You
just
wouldn't
like,
think you could do
like
10
after
courses.
the fifth one, you're like, how are they going to do another version of this, But then talking about how bamboo used to be so used in every aspect of Japanese life that it was kept under control. And it's only since bamboo hasn't been used for baskets and wood and clothing like hats, as well as food, that it has really become like a nuisance and
Right. Yeah.
taking over the forest and taking over people's gardens. How many people renovating old homes always complain about the bamboo takeover and how they have to spend the first 2 years like clearing all the bamboo all the time, right?
Well, we
So if
planted
we
it in
just
our
use
garden a
it
few years
more.
back and got in trouble with the neighbor for that. So, oops.
Yeah, I when we first moved in, I wanted to plant bamboo because I love bamboo. It's just so beautiful and it's such a regenerative,
Yeah.
quick growing, beautiful wood. But luckily, my husband's like, wait, let's think about where you're planting that, and we don't want it to take over, right?
Yeah. it's yes, it thrives anywhere, it seems. So,
Yeah.
got to be careful.
So that is our 30 minutes, and we will have another catch up talk next week. So great talk. Thanks, Tova.
Brilliant. Thank you, Joy. Have a good week.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good week. See you next time.
Bye.